Welcome to Femme House Radio. This is the February Black History Month takeover. Lady D and friends. And I couldn't think of any better friends than to have my girls on. And so we're going to start with Lori Branch, DJ Lori Branch.
Hey, thanks for
Hey,
having me.
listen, I'm excited because I don't think I've ever actually interviewed
I don't
you.
think so.
No, you've interviewed me a bunch of times. And so turnabout is fair play.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, so one thing that Lauren does, or Lo, her mix a lot, she usually starts out her interviews by asking for your DJ superhero Shiro origin story. So give it to us, quick and dirty. I mean, it doesn't have to be super quick, but you know, tell us your origin story.
Origin story, my DJ origin story.
Yeah.
Battle of the DJs, 1981, Southside place called Sours. And after maybe 3 months of practicing and playing little basement parties at my friend Craig Loftus' house, aka Grand High Priest, who was learning alongside of me. We were taught by this other wonderful producer and DJ named Louis Gomez. Nervously entered the stage like I had been doing it forever, me against like 8 guys. And I played a remix of Can't Fake the Feeling, my own tape deck remix. That's how I started it,
I love that.
mixed into it. And I did not win, but I got my cherry pop that night.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know it was like eight people. I thought it
Oh,
was
no.
like one person.
No, no, it was my first entry into DJing, like 4 people outside of a basement party,
Yeah.
was a battle of the DJs
That's
for like a
crazy.
1,000 people.
What?
That was my first gig.
I remember Sawyer's. So thinking about like the clubs that you played back in the day, what
Yeah.
were your favorite places to play?
Well, I think that, Sours and the Loft and a lot of those places that were Penthouse, early, you'll hear those names when you think about it, super early, like pre-house music parties. But one of my favorites was this place called R2 Underground, which was the predecessor to the Music Box. So people have heard of the Music Box, where Ron Hardy was the DJ and Robert Williams was the owner of it. And it was under 326, I think, Lower Michigan Avenue. It's this funky place, super cool, very underground, literally underground, which is why it was called R2 Underground. It was named after this club called the Ritz. And it was the same owner who started the Ritz #2. And Craig Cannon and Craig Loftus, the guy who was just talking about, he knew Craig Cannon, and he was like, "We're going to do a ladies' night." And he's like, "I have just the person for you." And so that was my first residency. And so
Mm,
that started, I think, in 1982, 83. So that was the first time like I had a weekly job and I had to really like sort of practice and build a crowd from chairs,
yeah.
or empty dance floor to like 3 people coming, 20 people coming, and
Mm-hmm.
people actually knowing that I was the DJ and showing up for that night.
Right.
So I feel like that was where I really learned how to DJ.
Okay. So did you have to masculinize yourself to be accepted?
In some instances, certainly not in that moment, but when I was hired to do other parties, I think so. Like I remember producers, the promoters, kind of wanting a certain energy and like even sort of trying to direct me while I was spinning, like play this, play that, and so I'm like, okay, I see where this is going. So I think I knew how to sort of put that on when I needed to, but I never liked doing it because it was often music I didn't like to play.
Okay.
And I think it's okay to sell out a little bit to the crowd. In my opinion, that means playing stuff you don't want to play, but
Hmm.
you need to,
Hmm.
um, to a certain degree. But when the whole night is like that, it's no longer fun for me. So I have shied away from masculine energy only type parties that are typically produced by somebody other than me.
Okay, that's perfect because we're on Femme House.
Yes.
Uh, so okay, what are the things that you're really known for? I'm glad I got to hear all of that. Like you really told your origin story very quickly, and then I got to ask like five other questions.
Okay.
So,
That way.
um, okay, so one of the things you are kind of known for is for being a historian,
Mhm.
right? Not only because of you were there, but because you really do care to tell these stories and sort of
Mhm.
archive these experiences and get all of this, I guess it's kind of like griot,
Yeah.
energy. for what you do with Vintage House.
Mhm.
Tell the people about Vintage House and why it's so important to you.
Well, Vintage House is a radio program that's affiliated with Evanston's Northwestern radio station in Chicago and in Evanston, but also worldwide on the web. And I was introduced to that by Lauren Lowry, who's the executive producer of the show. It's since become a podcast. We do a Facebook Live. It sort of evolves as a lot of these shows do. And I don't think I knew how important it was until I started talking to other people. And
Mm,
I realized that sometimes I think being a DJ can be lonely, because and being a woman DJ can be even lonelier
mm,
because, and if you're a woman DJ of a certain age, it gets even lonelier.
mhm,
A lot of my peers aren't here anymore. So that opened up a lot of conversations with me that I didn't know I needed to have, with people who I knew in a way, but not really. And I think that once I started having those conversations as part of the show, it really made me understand there were a lot of gaps in my own timeline and my own story. And like where I was on one side of it, like I had a very narrow understanding of what was really happening
mm,
in the community
yeah,
because I was very focused on what I was doing and with my crew and what have you. And I learned that even in the same places that I was in, there was a whole bunch of other stories.
yeah,
There was so everybody's got one. And so I'm fascinated by that as a person who likes history and a person who likes stories. And so I think it just became natural for me to want to document these things in a more substantive way.
so you guys have been doing it how many years?
This is our 10-year anniversary.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so how many stories do you think you've listened to
Oh
in that
my
time?
God. I don't hundreds.
Hundreds?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and there's an archive. So if
Yeah.
people wanted to interact with it, they
Yeah.
really could go someplace and like hear all of
They
this.
they can hear most of them. You can go to our I'm sorry, the Vintage House Show website,
Hmm.
and we have the Vintage House Show podcast. And we are in the process of actually trying to make sure we have archived as many as possible because in the beginning, we're just a radio show. We're just coming on the air. We weren't really recording it. We weren't thinking about it. And our first interview was with Terry, Terry, Psycho Bitch Terry,
Oh, Terry
Terry
Bristol.
Bristol.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Terry Bristol was my first interview.
Wow.
And we just didn't think
Yeah.
beyond the moment,
Yeah.
and she's no longer with us. And so I'm really saddened about that. And
Yeah.
so I've made a promise to myself and a plan to not let that happen
Yeah.
anymore. So we are very careful to document as much and as robustly as we can
Hmm.
with the technology at our hands.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And, as somebody who's been on the show, but also what you guys do collectively to make
Mhm.
that a part of Chicago's, not just folklore, but actual physical archive, like a digital record of what is transpiring, these stories.
Mhm.
Everybody, people don't know, but in Chicago, we kind of debate a lot,
Oh, yeah.
about house origins, these different
Mhm.
stories. A- As we get older, having a record of these things is even more important, if
Yeah.
you ask me.
Mhm.
Um, so last year, I want to say, I think it was last year, our friend Honey Dijon
Mhm.
made sure that you got a proper shout out on the web. She was like, y'all need to learn about Lori Branch. That's all I'm going to say. And if you don't know, now you know. And so it was important for her to really let people know who you are, not only to her because y'all are close, but also in terms of the larger story of house music and Chicago house.
Mhm.
As somebody who was there, and when the kids came along and started throwing these parties,
Yeah.
I mean, you experienced the original warehouse.
Mhm.
A lot of people say that they did, and a lot of people did not.
Right.
I want you to just kind of take us back, tell us a little bit about that community. What are some of the things people get wrong? Because it's like a long game of telephone that's been played over the years.
Yes.
What is the definitive thing you want people to know about that space or that time or, what you experienced?
That's a very good question. So one thing I'll say is that there was an original warehouse. So often you do hear people talking about the warehouse, and there was sort of another club called the warehouse, which came around some years later
Yeah.
after the first one closed, maybe about 10 years after the fact. I actually DJ'd at that second one,
Hmm.
which was also in Chicago, but that is not sort of the, ground zero
Right.
Mecca warehouse where Frankie Knuckles was the DJ. That was at 206 South Jefferson. The building is still there. It's not a club anymore.
Yeah.
But I think what you should know is that it really was the safest place, one of the safest places you could be as a person who's part of the queer community back in the late 70s and early 80s. And there were many underground type places, but we have sort of a more of a lounge community in Chicago. We
Yeah.
didn't have a club community. And that's why some of that debate exists because they're like, oh, there are many other gay clubs before the warehouse. No, there weren't. There was some lounge, some little lizard lounges on the south side and a few on the west side that had a certain night and maybe one or two established clubs, but nothing like
Yeah.
so the experience that you would have in like a real underground nightclub that was built to dance. That was the whole purpose of it.
Hmm.
It was the first time most people experienced a sound system by Richard Long, who's very well known for,
Yes.
curating like excellent sound. And Frankie Knuckles did become Frankie Knuckles at the warehouse. That's where that magic happened. And I don't know, there's so much else I could tell you about it. It was magical. It was magical for me and for so many people that I know.
Yeah, I like that you're making the distinction between, yeah, there may have been other places where
Mhm.
gay people were gathering,
Yeah.
but this is the first that was built to dance.
Mhm.
Richard Long sound system,
Mhm.
ugh,
Mhm.
impeccable. And where Frankie Knuckles became Frankie Knuckles.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. So this is why Honey says, listen, you better know. If you don't know, but you better know. Okay, so
I
Lori
love honey.
Branch, I know, and she loves you. Okay, so with music, you also have a background that involves Chicago's Baptist Church
Hmm.
and
Kojic.
Kojic,
Hmm.
Church of God in
Hmm.
Christ. What do you think this relationship is with gospel and house? I mean, obviously, that's a whole genre within house.
Hmm.
But for you, kind of having this sort of connection
Hmm.
and Chicago also being the birthplace of gospel music.
Hmm. So many intersections.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I think gospel is the root of it. There's so many ways to think of. First of all, gospel makes you dance. You ever been to Kojic? You ever been to the Church of God in Christ?
I
A
have.
holiness
How
experience,
can
a
you live in
holiness
Chicago
experience,
and not go at least
a
once?
holiness experience to encourage you to be in the moment and to dance and to have rhythm. They
Yeah.
were the first churches to have rhythm sections and to have
Mm,
drummers and
mm.
to be syncopated. This is house.
Yeah. Yeah.
They might not want to say that, but
No, why not? I
so
mean,
many people come out of
make
that
make the
experience.
connection for folks because I
Hmm.
think they miss that. That's why, I think sometimes the EDM side of things lacks that soul
Hmm.
because they don't want to feel the certain thing,
Hmm.
right? Like letting go is induced by a psychedelic or some sort of
Absolutely.
thing. But for a lot of us, you could just let go
You can
because
get into
you've
a trance.
yeah, because you've
Right.
had the experience
Hmm.
of being in a space
Hmm.
where, it was just that freedom came about that was coming out of the spirit. It was coming out
100%.
of, yeah, somebody was lifting you to a place,
Hmm.
whether it's the preacher, the minister, the choir, the
Yeah.
band, whatever, put it all together and you were having this sort of, outer body
Right.
experience.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Kojic was important in my family because my great grandfather established the first Church of God in Christ in Chicago and then planted the ones throughout the Midwest. But Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Arizona Drains, I mean, it goes on and on. VJ Records, all this stuff, had some roots in Kojic and specifically in Robert's Temple.
Hmm.
Um, and all of those are so important to me because that's where I started hearing hearing this music that was sort of or otherworldly.
Hmm.
And as I grew up and really began to appreciate the history of that, I understood why I was who I was and how I, you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't my legacy was not an accident.
Yeah,
You know, none of our legacies are an accident. You know,
it's
you
true.
are some of your ancestors' dreams,
Absolutely.
you know. And so I'm just really thankful that I had that experience. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was preparing me.
Yeah. You just brought something up for me, because I got a lot of my love for music because my brothers were DJs and I had all
Mhm.
this equipment in my house. Did you have I know you guys had music in
Oh,
your
yeah.
house,
We
so
had mandatory lessons. We had everybody had to take an instrument. I learned the piano and I was decent at it. The only person who stuck with it was my little brother. And that's when they tell you some people have a gift and other people don't. Like I
Mm.
played for 6 years and I was like, I could tap out a Mozart tune here or there. He played for 6 months and has surpassed everything I had learned.
Uh-huh.
And so we grew up listening to music, live music because everybody played an instrument. But it was also appreciated. But I also had a psychedelic older hippie sister, who introduced me
Nice.
to Shaka Khan and Rufus and Jethro Tull
Yes.
and
All the
the
good stuff.
60s stuff and so yeah, I was exposed to a lot of that.
I have piano in my house. My sister got the lessons, my oldest sister, and by the time I was born, 17 years later,
Mhm.
I really loved music. I should have been the one that got the lessons, but my dad said, she did not become a pianist. I wasted a lot of money on lessons.
Oh,
And so here I am with her sheet music trying to
figure
teach
it out.
myself. Yes,
It's not
I
fair.
know it wasn't fair. So
But you became a world famous DJ.
oh, and she became an amazing MD.
That's
So
right. I met your sister.
okay, so my last question for you,
Mhm.
because I know we have to run, but in addition to like the things that you're doing for keeping the history of house,
Mhm.
you're also doing these experiential things in these exhibits
Yes.
that have been all over the city and like most notably, I think at our world famous Navy Pier.
Mhm.
Uh, like, what is that all about? Why do you feel compelled to do that? What's next for that?
Well, I mean, I think that ephemera is important too. So stories are great, pictures are great, but actually being able to sort of see the flyers and to see the ordinance that the city, used to shut down clubs. I mean, to actually sort of see these things and lay your hands on them when we can actually display things like somebody's gold record or their collection or what have you. It's a different type of experience for people, and it brings you, I think, even closer to the music and the era. So I just feel like it's another way to express ourselves artistically and to tell the story. And that's a story that continues to evolve. So every time we do the exhibition, which consists of pictures, posters, timeline from the mid 70s all the way to 2023, when Honey Dijon did get that Grammy for Renaissance, we'll continue to expand that. And it is Chicago specific. So we do recognize like the things that happened in the city, but there's room to grow. But we want people to know the Chicago story, which is why it is very focused.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Chicago really, I mean, I'm gonna say it on behalf of Chicago. Thank you, Lori
Thank
Branch.
you, Lady D.
Yes, and thank you for coming to Femme House. Do you have anything you want to share with people? Anything coming up? I know we're going to be going back into the studio with the good girls, with our girl VD Girl,
Girl.
and we'll all be together. VD Girl will be on next week's interview, and we'll
Yeah.
all be together for the end of February for the last show.
Yes.
So I'm just looking, forward to going back in the studio with us. I think our first track is a bona
It's
fide
fire,
hit.
man. It's
Yes.
fire. I can't wait to do
So,
more.
yeah, we're gonna do some more.
Yeah,
So,
DJ Lady D is prominently featured in our exhibit, and we're going to be with a special placard all about her career that I believe, hopefully, cross your fingers, is going to be a major, I won't tell you where it is, but a major place with literally hundreds of thousands of people passing through all the time. So I'll keep you posted on
wow,
that.
that's news to me. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Lori.